my lesson this afternoon is really pretty simple. It's that I'm coming out. Yeah, I said it. I'm coming out. I'm coming out of fear. But what else is there to come out of? Because if we're honest, we're all stuck in some kind of fear, right? We fear trying new things. We fear for our health, for the health of our loved ones. We fear death. We fear life. We fear failing. We fear succeeding. We fear being alone. We fear losing something or losing someone. We fear being unworthy. We fear rejection. We fear the unknown. We fear change. We fear pain. We fear shame, ridicule, criticism. We fear old age. We fear poverty. And for some folks, they fear God. But mostly, we fear the bad feelings that come with fear. Now, did I hit on one of your fears? Because these are universal fears, fears that we all probably have experienced at one time or another. Now, there are two ways that we experience fear. The first way is a vital response to an actual physical or emotional danger. It's an instinctive response for coping with imminent danger, which is also known as a flight or fight response. And if we didn't feel it, we couldn't protect ourselves from legitimate threats. There are many physiological changes in the body that are associated with this kind of fear. The heart rate accelerates, the blood vessels dilate, adrenaline flows, and the muscle tensions will increase. But just as the name suggests, this primitive mechanism of fight or flight, it helps an organism to survive by either running away so that you can get away from danger or going someplace safe. And this means that, like many years ago, when man saw his friends and his relatives devoured by a saber-toothed tiger, fear would kick in when he faced that tiger in the jungle, causing him to either flee in terror or fight back with his spear. When you're in immediate danger, fear tells you to go someplace safer or get ready to fight. But remember, it's only after the physiological changes kick in that we become aware of the emotion or the feeling of fear. Now let me give you a personal example. One Friday about 34 years ago, I was leaving the beauty parlor in Brooklyn, and a young man snatched my pocketbook. Now I was headed to the train on my way home to Queens, and in that pocketbook was my last $50, and most importantly, my newly acquired marriage license. You see, we were getting married the next day, and we had gone through a lot of effort just to get that marriage license. And the threat of someone taking everything that I had caused me immediate panic and terror. So without thinking, I pulled off my wooden Dutch clogs, ran and chased him all the way down the block until I caught him. And then I proceeded to hit him in the head with that Dutch clog shoes until he gave me my pocketbook back. Fight or flight. For me, it was fight. Now, the second way that we talk about fear is probably more common. And it's when we talk about this kind of fear that we're usually not talking about our personal safety or our physical safety. It's usually about something that we think or that we imagine that may happen. And that is false evidence appearing real. There's no real threat of immediate physical danger. There's no emotional danger. There's actually nothing there at all. It's an illusion. Something that we fabricated in our mind and that we believe is real. Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science and the author of Science of Mind, has a quote which I want to read to you. It says, "Fear is neither person, place, nor thing. Fear is a certain way of mentally looking at things and reacting to them. Fear is not an entity, but a mental state, a state of thought and feeling, end quote. So since fear is not an entity, you can overcome it because you are an entity. Can you now see that this kind of fear is an emotional response that arises purely from your own thoughts, and it's not an external reality? And since we have the power to choose and control how we think, how we feel, and how we act, we therefore have the power to overcome fear. Fear, thoughts, and beliefs have no foundation in truth. It's merely our perception of a threat. And when we talk about it, we always talk about it by starting out saying, well, what if this? And what if that? But the what if is not a fact. It's our thoughts and the stories that they form into, which we take at face value, we give them validity, and then we pretend that they're real. But they're only thoughts and stories. And we don't have to believe them, we don't have to give them power, and we don't have to let them keep us from accomplishing what we want to do and what we need to do. Fear arises from error thinking, from negative beliefs, from race consciousness, from the environment, from the media, from religious institutions, and even from the government. Fear is not born. It's not born out of right thinking. Fear is not born of God. Fear is a projection of our mind. Fear is the imagination running rampant. Fear is created by man. Fear is the absence of trust, faith, and belief in God. And we know that in God, there is no fear. Liberally sprinkled throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, are words of encouragement that are telling us not to fear. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 says, "For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind." 1 John chapter 4, verse 18 says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear is tormenting, and he who fears is not made in perfect love." The 23rd Psalm, verse 4 says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." The 27th verse, Psalm verse 1 says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" The 56th Psalm, verses 3 and 4 say, "I fear not during the day, because I trust in thee. In God will I be glorified. In God have I put my trust. I will fear not what man can do to me." So just why are we fearful? Especially when we now know that fear is not real. If you're afraid, it's because you're believing incorrectly. You're not believing in the truth. You're believing in the lie. You're not giving power to the truth. You're giving power to the lie. But when you know the truth, when you affirm the truth, then you cannot believe the lie because it has no power, and so you should not be afraid. So whenever you find yourself feeling afraid, simply trace your fears back to the lie. Then identify the truth of the lie. We always have the ability to discover that who we really are has nothing to fear, and that we make ourselves fearful each time that we look outside ourselves for either power or truth. We have power over every single fear right within us. And the truth will always set us free because no lie can live in the light. There are scientific studies that are showing that areas of the brain that are affected in relationship to fear. And it's been proven that individuals have learned to fear, whether they have personally experienced trauma themselves or whether they see someone else going through fear. So fear is a learned behavior. The problem with most people is that they cling to their fears and it becomes a part of who they are. They're afraid to live and they're afraid to die. They're afraid of the present and they're afraid of the past. Fear can stop us from living life fully and from experiencing real joy. It can paralyze us, and it can also destroy our wealth, our health, our relationships, and our peace of mind. Decisions that are based on fear do not take us where we want to go, but they instead take us exactly where we want to avoid, where we want to leave behind. Fear is a dream stealer. Fear inhibits our ability to live as free and unlimited beings in consciousness. Fear also keeps us from letting our inner light shine. But fear cannot take what you do not give it. Fear keeps you living downwards, even though you may be reaching upwards in consciousness. To get rid of fear, you have to do what you are most afraid to do. You have to face it. There's no other way around it. There are no exit strategies. There are no shortcuts. There are no emergency exits. And there are no hiding places. Fear is a great predictor of our future. The things we fear most become our reality. Job said it. The thing which I have greatly feared has come upon me. Job worried and fretted about losing his children, his health, his livestock, his worldly possessions. And one day the things that he didn't want to happen, it happened. Fear is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The reason is simply because our thoughts and our behavior become so fixated on preventing the fear that it ultimately manifests and becomes our reality. What we attract, what we fear, because thoughts are things. Fear drains our energy and it drains our joy for life. Fear is destructive. The energy of fear is not only destructive, but it's contagious. Not only do we manufacture it without thinking about it, but we can spread it or catch it from somebody else. I read the following quote from Dr. Gregory D'Amato, which really makes this point, and I want to read it to you. It says, "The Western world has purposely been misled, intimidated, and hypnotized by fear. From nearly all established institutions and civilizations. The best way to wire an individual's brain for fear is to consistently state the exact same premise over and over again, regardless of the accuracy of such statements. Neuroscientists state individuals unconsciously begin to believe such statements, and the more often these ideas are reinforced, the stronger the hard wiring becomes." Now let me just stop and tell you this. That's why it's so important for us to daily practice our affirmations, our denials, our meditations, our visualizations, our prayer work, because then we can combat and reverse those negative influences that come from outside of us. So now, that quote goes on to say, "We live in a semi-conscious state of terrorism, where our minds have ostensibly been pre-programmed for fear. As history has consistently shown mankind, the best way to control a population is through the institutionalization of fear. Cancer, debt, dis-ease, terrorism, sleeper cells, war, Al-Qaeda, and death are just some of the key words circulated through our daily lives. But how much of these are actually truth threats deserving of our fear? Even better, how many of these fears are simply unfounded and misguided to keep us in uncertain apprehension and a controlled state of mind? That's the end of the quote. Well, I believe the answer to the question that he asked is that all of them are there to keep us in a state of fear. And that's why we need to recognize and understand the difference between fear as a result of present and imminent danger and false evidence appearing real. Because once we can discern the difference, once we can be honest about what's really going on, we can see the lie in fear and move to the lie into truth. So here's a simple example of how we can do that. One major fear that we all face is that of lack. The fear that your needs won't be met, but the truth is that there is no lack in the universe, that God freely and abundantly supplies our every need, our every want, and our every desire. Even when it seems as if nothing is happening in your life, the universe is working and will manifest your good right on time, but not in our time, in God's divine time. And the truth is that there's no limit to God's endless supply of good unless we choose to limit it. Holding fast to this truth requires faith, persistence, and consistency. Fear cannot exist where faith lives. So what else can we do to overcome fear? The first thing is recognize that the only place your fear is happening right now is in your mind. You have the power to choose your thoughts, and you can choose to think a new thought about your circumstances and recognize the truth that God is always in control of your life. Number 2, ask yourself the question, what am I really afraid of? Whatever it is, I want you to know it all boils down to one thing. You don't trust God. Yeah, I said that. You don't trust God. Number 3, go ahead and look at the worst case scenario of what it is that you fear. Then use the faculty of your imagination to visualize your best scenario. Because remember, it's all a product of your mind. Life is consciousness. Number 4, as Norman Vincent Peale would say, there's only one way to kill fear. Just do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. Just do it. Faith without works is dead. So you may be asking, why are you, Minister Sharon, so ready to come out of fear? Well, that answer is simple. It's easy. Because I want to be free. I want to be free to live and to express the truth that fear is simply a way that we suppress the limitless potential of who and what we are as spiritual beings. It's when we can release our fears as individuals that we can take control of our destinies and facilitate transformation. Transformation in our own lives first, and then transformation in the world. It's only when we can break free of our fears that we're truly open to expressing and experiencing our true life purpose, and then to live a joyful, loving, and abundant life. When all else fails, and you feel particularly fearful, just fall back and let the universe catch you. So there are two things I want to leave you with. The first is a prayer that's called A Litany Against Fear from Frank Hubert's 1965 novel, Dune. And it reads, I must not fear. Fear is a mind killer. Fear is a little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where fear has gone, there will be nothing, and only I will remain. The I that remains in Spirit family is the I am. It's God. It's Spirit. So if God is all that remains, and God is the only presence and power, then there is nothing to fear, because there is nothing but God. And here's the second thing that I want to leave you with. And that's to remember the acronym for fear. False evidence appearing real. And then I want you to change it into this. Face everything and rejoice. Rejoice because you know that fear is not real. Rejoice because you know that God is the only presence and the only power. Rejoice because you know that with God, all things are possible. And rejoice because you know that you can overcome fear. InSpirit family, are you ready to come out? Are you ready to be your true and divine self? The you that is free from fear, the you that is free from worry, the you that is free from pain, anxiety, doubt, debt, sickness. Are you ready to become the person you were created to be? Living each day of your life fearlessly. Then come on out. Because I'm coming out.